May you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. This blessing was spoken over young Jewish men when they would begin following a local religious leader. Following their teacher would mean leaving the life they knew and going where the rabbi goes, doing what he does, and ultimately having their life shaped to reflect the rabbi. 2,000 years later, we have a rabbi, a teacher. He is the resurrected King Jesus, and you and I have the same opportunity to follow him. In pursuit of Jesus, we can leave the life we know and walk so closely with him, going where he would go, doing what he would do, and having our lives reflect his. Make this the year where you commit to be covered in the dust of your rabbi.
Hey students, welcome to 2023. Super glad to be kicking off this brand new year with you. Question for you. Any of you know who Patrick Willis is? I assume for most of you the answer is going to be no. But Patrick Willis was drafted in the first round of the 2007 NFL Draft by the San Francisco 49ers as a middle linebacker. And at the time, I was playing football in high school, and I was playing middle linebacker. And so when my favorite team drafted the guy who became my favorite player, I was committed to modeling my game after his. I watched his highlights. I tried to find workout routines that he would do. I started taking creatine and trying to eat right so I could be just like Patrick. Not the star, Patrick Willis. Stick with me. I even tried to convince another guy on my team to swap jersey numbers with me so I could also wear number 52, which is the number that Patrick wore. And though I tried my best, I could never become like Patrick Willis. He was 6'1". At the time, I was like 5'8". He was a rocked up 245, and I was 185 soaking wet. And he could rep 225 on the bench press 22 times. At the time, I could do it maybe 3. So, not really good chances there. But I didn't let that stop me. I worked hard and I tried hard, and though I never made it to the NFL, I have been a part of a few flag football championships in my time, both as a player and a coach, so, we're pretty similar. I assume most of us have had people that we want to emulate, and people we want to be like. People whose life looks so good, their talent level was so high, or their money was so great, maybe their IQ was so high, we wanted to be just like them. Maybe they were a great athlete, or an incredible musician. Maybe you had a teacher that made a really great impact on your life. Maybe you want to be just like one of your parents because of the example that they are to you. Or you want to be like Elon Musk and build rockets, or Steve Jobs and make sweet technology. Maybe you want to be president one day, or a youth pastor at Christ Community Church. Also, very similar jobs. My point is that emulation is not an uncommon thing, and it's also not a new thing. A couple thousand years ago, at the time of Jesus, emulation was a thing just as much as it is now. But instead of wanting to be like Carly Lloyd or Ninja, young people in Jesus' time often emulated their local rabbi. A rabbi was a Jewish religious teacher. And this guy would have known everything about the Jewish faith. He would have been incredibly wise, would have been living a life that nearly perfectly aligned with the Jewish law. And the local rabbi had a responsibility to teach and to train others in Jewish law. And so young Jewish men would be sent off to school to learn, and if they excelled enough, they would continue their schooling through these different levels of schooling, possibly beginning to learn from this rabbi, and then maybe they'd have the opportunity to learn directly from this local rabbi. To do that, though, this student would have to go to the rabbi and say to him, "Hey, I'd like to follow you. I'd like to learn from you." And if the student was seen as worthy enough, then he would leave everything he knew, and he would follow this teacher and learn from him. And when they would leave home to follow this rabbi, they'd be given a blessing that would go something like this: "May you be covered in the dust of your rabbi." Implying this student would walk so closely to their rabbi that they would end up covered in the dust that their rabbi would kick up when he walked. The idea is that this student would go where the rabbi went, do what the rabbi did, and ultimately end up living a life that reflected very closely the life of the rabbi. When Jesus kicked off his ministry on earth, he followed a really similar pattern, but with a few significant differences. We're going to pick it up in Matthew chapter 4, starting in verse 18. We're going to read one of Jesus's calls of his followers. It reads like this: "As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. 'Come follow me,' Jesus said, 'and I will send you out to fish for people.' And at once they left their nets and followed him. And going on from there, he saw 2 other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. And they were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left their boat and their father and followed him. So we see kind of a similar thing here, but Jesus flips the script on this idea of following after someone. And where previously someone would have had to prove themselves worthy in the most prestigious of schools, they'd have to gather up a bunch of courage and then approach a rabbi and ask to be able to follow them. Jesus, the rabbi, went out and he approached an unqualified group of outcasts. And he said, hey, leave your life and follow after me, and I'm going to change your life forever. We're starting a new series today all about following Jesus as our teacher, as our rabbi. And I think this message is maybe more important than ever. While following Jesus has never been easy, the season we find ourselves in as a culture is certainly a tough one to follow Jesus in. The input from less than Christ-like sources all over social media and music and other forms of entertainment. We have influences from friends that don't see following Jesus as much of a priority. And we get pressures to perform in school and extracurricular stuff that ends up honestly just crowding out quiet time or church involvement or belonging to a local church. So internally and externally, there are pressures that we face that would draw us away from walking faithfully with Jesus. But one thing that might make following Jesus harder for us is the fact that for some time now, people who claim to be followers of Jesus haven't really lived like they ought to be. One culture researcher had this to say. He said, American Christianity has largely failed since the middle of the 20th century because Jesus' modern-day disciples don't act like Jesus. There's some strong words. But if we just take stock of the last couple of years, we can see really obvious examples of what this guy is talking about. We see the church tearing itself apart, and that makes culture look at us and say, what value is there in that faith? But see, the problem isn't just those Christians out there. Because if I'm honest, when I examine my own life, there are areas of my life that don't reflect Jesus as much as I'd like them to. And I bet if you examine your life, you might feel similarly. So, as we kick off this brand new year, it feels like a great time to reorient and to refocus our lives. Whether you've been following Jesus for as long as you can remember, or you're new to all things church, maybe you're still not sold on it at all. My prayer is that 2023 would be a year of growth for all of us in our pursuit of Jesus. With so many people to emulate, though, I wonder if the question arises, why follow Jesus? Why choose him among all the other people we could follow? And I think the answer is hidden in the verses that come after his invitation. Let's pick it up in verse 23. Jesus went throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness among the people. News about him spread all over Syria, and people brought to him all those who were ill with various diseases, those suffering severe pain and demon-possessed, those having seizures and the paralyzed, and he healed them. See, the picture that we get in these verses is that while Jesus is a rabbi and teacher, he is also much more than that. See, Jesus is a teacher worth following because he is God. Jesus' ministry was marked by examples of his power as God, the power to change and to transform, to heal, to free, to set right. And so when he looks at those first disciples and he invites them to follow him and says, I'm going to change your life, that was a promise they could trust because they saw his power in action. So over the next few weeks, we're going to look at Jesus' most famous message, the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to explore together what our rabbi and Savior Jesus had to say about the life that he wants for his followers, the life that he modeled for us. But here's the great thing. There's no prerequisite. There's no need to prove yourself or to earn Jesus' favor. His invitation to follow him is available to the world. It's available to you. So with hundreds of people that we could choose to live like, choosing to live like King Jesus is the most fulfilling, most satisfying, most loving, and life-giving example that we could choose to follow. So let's start this year, not only recognizing our need for forgiveness and salvation in Jesus, but also committing to live like him, walking with him. Let's choose to make this the year where we're covered in the dust of our rabbi, Jesus.